All right, Kevin, back with you for another episode of the $1 Million Relationships Podcast. And today I'm here with Travis Ketchum. Travis, welcome. So awesome to have you, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's always great to do these things, especially great to do them when I know you're physically close. Normally people are halfway across the world or whatever, but I think you and I are minutes apart. So
we're pretty doggone close to each other, and I got to give a shout out to Robert, because Robert, it's interesting. Before you and I met a couple weeks ago in person, I had never met Robert in person either. And we connected on Facebook, and we have a bunch of mutual friends. And in fact, I was down in Austin in January, and we had tried getting together, but it didn't work out. And so when he came up here, it worked out that we all got together. And so, it was really cool, because even though you and I didn't know each other, because Robert and I already had this kind of relationship going, and even though we had never met in person, and you guys knew each other because you guys were obviously, some of your conversations that day between you and Robert was going right over my head.
Well, he and I had never met in person before a few weeks ago either. We had just messaged online, just like you and he.
Gotcha.
He. So.
Very cool. Very cool. And that is, again, yet another testament to the power of relationships. And that, I have long contended that as entrepreneurs, relationships are the most valuable asset we possess. Everything else stems from that. And that was another great example of that. So yeah, I just want to give a shout out to Robert, because now here you and I are, Travis, doing this interview, and I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. And so why don't we start by just setting a little bit of context here. I'll start by, we'll turn it over to you so that you can share a little bit about what you do, who you serve, what inspires you most about the work you're doing and the impact you're making in the world. And we'll just start there, Travis.
Sure. Well, so I think it's important to state that even though I'm in my mid-30s, I feel like I have my AARP card in the online software world, because I've been doing this forever. From my perspective, I've been into technology since like third grade, but running an online business since high school. So I've been practicing and putting in the reps for quite some time. But currently, and for the last number of years now, I founded a platform called Campaign Refinery, which is an email platform that helps quality senders achieve truly remarkable results, primarily as a reflection of helping them really dial in their email deliverability. So getting their inbox rate as high as possible, their open rate as high as possible, their click rate as high as possible, so that everything else down their digital funnel from their owned traffic from their own email list is as performant as possible. And when I originally started down this path, I knew it was going to be challenging. I knew it was going to be expensive, because it's not my first SaaS to build. Okay. But even with that, I can humbly tell you it was easily 10 times harder, 10 times more expensive. It took 10 times longer than I thought it would to get down this hole. But I think we finally cracked a few key pieces that are really, truly unlocking some cool stuff for our best customers.
Well, and I think, you and I were talking, and I usually wouldn't do this, but, I'll give another shout out to Brad Costanzo, because you and I have a connection in Brad. And I didn't know that before today. And, Brad has become a good friend over the years. And it doesn't hurt, because you had a connection with Brad through your previous SaaS. Right. And so you'd already had a reputation for delivering results through software products and stuff. And I'm sure that didn't hurt it might have been 10 times more difficult, 10 times, more, cost more, take 10 times as long. But I guarantee you, I know you, Travis, I know looking back, you're like, it was all worth it. It was all worth it. And
I mean, we're at a good place now, and I'm feeling really excited about, where we're headed. We're cash flow positive because I've bootstrapped the whole thing. But there was a while where it was a significant upside down venture, where it was, the ships were burning and we hadn't quite hit shore. So I'm really thrilled that we've made it through to this side, and that that the team is expanding, and we have bright horizons ahead. But if I hadn't been cutting my chops for the better part of 6, 8, 10 years on my previous SaaS, it would have been completely insurmountable for me
Mhm.
to tackle this email problem in the way that I chose to do it, and for the market that I chose to do it for.
You bring up such a huge distinction right there, that your what you did previously really helped build the foundation for what you're doing now. Because the same exact thing is true for me. My previous business, which was a publishing company that I ran for 13 years, I what I do now is nothing to do with that. But yet running that business totally allowed me, because I did over 600 strategic partnerships in that 30 years. And I became really adept, really good at just forming relationships and creating valuable relationships, which in turn set the platform, set the foundation for the work that I get to do today. And you're right. So you had a leg up coming into this, that you're right. If had you not had that, yeah, maybe it wouldn't have worked out, but it did.
I
And
can pretty much guarantee you it wouldn't have worked out, because we got pretty close to the sun as it was, even with the advantages of an audience and cash flow and a positive reputation, all those other kind of things. So
yeah,
even with that, it took everything I had
yeah,
to make it
yeah,
work.
yeah. So, Travis, what inspires you most about the impact you guys are making through what you're doing?
I mean, I think the part that's I think it's kind of two answers. I think the core part in terms of like operationally what's most interesting is that fact that email is a really hard problem.
Mhm.
And so I get excited by solving hard problems, right?
Wow.
I mean, it took over $1 million of my own money to properly solve email, right? And there's still a little bit of gas left in the tank in that, where we can continue to optimize a little bit further. But it's a freaking hard problem, and it's rare crowd that has solved it or even understands how to solve it. And so going down the path and process to make that happen really gets me excited, because the way my mind works, I like chewing on hard things, right? Like,
Mhm.
life would not be fulfilling if every time I stood up to bat, it was just a home run and you can lazily jog around the plates, right? Like
That's right.
that would not be rewarding to me. So like, on one hand, it's easy to get a little bit jaded sometimes when you're in the thick of things about the challenge, but then when you get through it, it's so much more rewarding. So
Yeah.
that gets me excited from the customer perspective, because it is such a hard problem. I get really excited to see people that are really high level operators, as I like to call them, people that are so good at their craft about things or parts of their business that I will likely never be at that level at. And then we can come in with this solution to this really complex problem. And because they have so much leverage in what they're doing in every other part of their business, by inserting ourselves into that, we get to see phenomenal results come out of the backside. And so watching operators plug us in as a solution and get outsized results that we know we could never do the whole stack and replicate the same thing on our own, because our skill sets are just different. Like, that is inspiring to watch.
Yeah.
Their machine run, and we just plug in as lighter fluid, or how whatever analogy you want to use.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you are able to work with those ideal, like you said, higher level operators, you can have a really, really big impact there, because they've already got these foundational things in place that you, just like you said, just plug your thing in and you can have really big results very quickly.
Yeah, it's really fascinating to watch, right? Because like, some of these organizations that we plug into, they have a scope of their team is so much larger, with so many different skill sets of in areas of the business that we just aren't at,
Mhm.
but they aren't able to solve this really complex problem because it takes so many years, so much money, and so much effort of like laser focused expertise to fix it. And it's such a relief for them. It's such an instant, needle mover, that it really makes it a joy to work with those kind of people.
Wow, that's really cool. That's really cool. now you've got my mind thinking about like, who could I connect Travis with? So I appreciate you sharing all that. So, okay, so now that we've got a little bit of context set, let's shift gears. So I'm going to reiterate the question for the benefit of the listeners. Have you ever been introduced to a person or persons that completely changed the course of your life or your business, so much so that much of what you have today would not be possible if not for this person or persons? And Travis, I'm just really excited to hear your story and your experience around this topic of relationships.
Yeah, so relationships are a really interesting thing, right? Because if you think about, if, we'll get to your question, but if we remove the business part from that question, and you just think about your life in general, who your friends are, who your family are, you'll notice that as we all get older, you notice an arc, right? And there's a natural ebb and flow to the people that come into your life or even exit your life at certain stages. And there's always hopefully, a symbiotic relationship of some kind, but you can point to clear moments, right? Like if you think back to being a kid, there was probably like a teacher that had a really strong influence on you, right? And so you can think about these sort of key chapters, as I like to think about them, as your life progresses. And I think the exact same thing happens with your business. And in my case, we've had a good number of chapters and hopefully a lot of chapters yet to be written. So who knows who the people will be in the future. But there were definitely a couple critical components at, fragile moments in business history for me that made a difference, right?
Okay.
So if we
Okay.
go all the way back, right, and we think like when I started my first drop shipping business on eBay in high school that
Okay.
paid for part of my college experience, right? The teachers that I had that were encouraging me to start a business and file it and go after opportunities and take risks, setting that mindset early on, which was an early marketing teacher and actually of all things kind of a social studies teacher that just saw the entrepreneurial part of me. Those two teachers combined helped me feel more confident in taking a risk super early on, seeing some of the rewards of entrepreneurship super early on at a time when, like this is not against my mom, but she was like, why aren't you just delivering more pizzas for the pizza place I was working for? And I was like, well, because I want to try this thing. Right.
Mhm,
And that
mhm.
thing got me like 25 grand in a few months when I was broke at 18 and paid for a
That's
good chunk
pretty
of college. Right.
impressive at 18, you know?
Right. And so like because they were shoving me when I was kind of like I want to do this, but I may not have jumped out there on my own. And so that experience, right, gives you the confidence when you move to the next stage. And so when we were, went through college and got a job and then ended up working for an affiliate manager. And as an affiliate manager for a best-selling author and speaker, I had some sort of tensions with that one contract because this person was very demanding. And I started the germ of the idea for that first software product being, hey, I've got this idea about how to do contests better, which, hindsight more than 11 years later is really sort of tilted the entire contest industry and everyone basically ended up copying us. So turns out it was a good idea, but in the beginning it wasn't apparent that it was going to be a really good idea. And
Okay.
I didn't have a lot of money to test at that time. I still had student loan payments and a car payment and like all these other things, right? And I got this first little extremely minimal viable product version done, extremely stripped down WordPress plugin, like barely could do what I needed it to at minimum. And I had a really basic sales page and I was like, okay, I know I need traffic into this now, right? And so I got an introduction to Mark Thompson,
Okay.
who was one of the co-founders of Pay Kickstart.
Okay.
Um, and I had other friends that told me, hey, you should do like a forum launch and you should do, do this way and that way. And I originally wanted to reach out to Mark Thompson because I was like, hey, can we plug my product in as an upsell or downsell or something to your funnel? Because I knew just enough to even ask that question. And he took a look at it and said, hey, there's some interesting potential here. I think you have some really cool features. Needs a lot of polish, needs a lot of shine. Why don't we work together and do an actual proper launch?
Okay.
Right. And so that went from, hey, I put 7,500 bucks on a credit card, hoping this is going to pan out while I'm still doing my agency client work,
Hmm.
to where we did $250,000 in a week.
Nice.
Right. And
Nice.
so that is clearly a pivotal moment.
Yep.
Half that goes to affiliates and there's a lot of overhead.
Yep.
But that was like Wow. Okay. So you can, going through the whole process, idea, what it takes to actually run a launch, how to recruit affiliates, what the support looks like, what the intense stress cycle looks like for a 1 week launch that takes months to pull off,
Mhm.
right? All those things are involved with that, getting my first, 10,000 customers on my email list, uh, getting some momentum in a marketplace, and then immediately trying to turn around. I basically took no profit from that and immediately plowed it into the SaaS version, right? So I took strategic moves from that, but there were so many learnings compressed into such a small amount of time. And it was his heavyweight ability in recruiting affiliates and having just kind of guaranteed successful launches that got us all that traffic immediately out of the gate.
Yeah.
And in hindsight, it made so much more of the next steps so much easier. Because, oh yeah, I remember seeing that product that seemed to do well in the marketplace. So the next time I want to run an offer or build a product or recruit an affiliate, each step got slightly easier because of that relationship with Mark Thompson. And so I will forever be grateful for his not only willingness to talk to me at all, because I was a complete, nobody in the marketing space at that time, but then to see that there was something of interest there
Yep.
and see that the bigger opportunity, much bigger than what I was shooting for, right? I was going for the, 500 to $2,000 a month opportunity, and he wanted to do the $250,000 in a week
Yes. Yeah.
opportunity. They're just different things. So
That's right.
I would say that's definitely the first chapter.
And what a great story, because that for one, it definitely, well, not only did it give you, the input you needed to know that you had something of value that people would want, because you definitely proved that in that process, but also because of Mark, and his vision, and not just his vision, but his experience and his resources that he had available, because of who he was. Together, the two of you were able to accomplish that, which is something that neither one of you could have done on your own. Neither one of you could have achieved that result.
Yeah, he needed more products to put in the pipeline because he was kind
Yes.
of a launch machine at that time, and he was doing his own products too. But just to get the volume he needed other products to fill the calendar. And I was kind of simpleton in my thinking about, you know, what we could bring to the table there. And so that was a pretty cool experience.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. All
Yeah.
right, very good. So, when and what year was that experience with you and Mark took place, Travis?
Yeah, that was early 2012.
Okay, all right, okay. So let's continue on.
Yeah. So, um, one of my first customers, even before that initial launch, because I'd gotten a couple hundred customers when I knew that on that initial WordPress product, one of those first customers, I think like first 5 customers, maybe even, was actually a software developer who, right before we launched, sent me a version, said, "Hey, I fixed a few bugs in your WordPress plugin. Just here you go." And it turned out that he wanted to move back to the Seattle area, and so we actually ended up partnering on the SaaS version
Oh,
of Contest Domination, which was pretty cool because he said, "Hey, I want to license your name, and here's what I want to do with it." And I was like, "Actually, here was the vision I had. We should just work together and call it the same thing." And he was like, "Done."
nice,
Right.
nice.
And so that was a multi-year relationship that was, because he had a skill set that I couldn't do, and allowed me the latitude to learn how to run SaaS and try to
Mhm.
teach me about Scrum and sprints and how to actually run a software company from the software side of things. And so that was super valuable. And then, helped me build up more confidence, more reps, more skills in more areas to be a more well-rounded entrepreneur that understood the marketing component, but then understood a heck of a lot more about the software, even if I was never going to be a developer writing hundreds of thousands of lines of code for an app that I was trying to build. I had a much deeper understanding about what it took, had a much better feeling about what a proper cadence should look like, what a competent developer should look like, what kind of questions they should be asking, all these kinds of things that are these intangibles that you kind of have to have as a SaaS founder
Yeah, yeah.
to accurately gauge. It's a trap that a lot of business minded, folks that want to get into software fall into. And and then conversely, software-minded people that want to have a successful business have to sort of have a same learned experience on the marketing side, right? About positioning and avatar and your features don't matter. It's the benefits of the benefits of the benefits and all that kind of stuff. So that was a key piece, and that built the foundation and got me to the point where I could start to mess with the idea of what was Campaign Refinery, because he and I started working together on the very early version of Campaign Refinery before he had another opportunity he wanted to take, and it was all good, and had to go down the path of hiring other developers and whatnot. But that was a key piece to help season me on the software chops
Yeah. And
side
what
of
is his
things.
name, Travis?
Michael Fountain.
Michael. Okay. Okay.
He actually also lives up here in the Pacific Northwest because he moved out here and never moved away. So
Wow. Very cool. Very
yeah,
cool. Very
yeah.
cool.
And he had also had a successful software exit in the past. A company that sold to a much bigger company and had worked there for several years. And so getting some of that idea about, what does a successful exit look like?
Hmm.
What does just a graceful exit look like? What does a really successful exit look like? What attributes do you need to have in order to make that work? Um, and while I would say, my exit of contest domination, which was the thing that he and I had originally built together, um, was not like the most spectacular exit of all time. Even the way that I was able to exit it and have that acquired probably would not have happened at all if I hadn't had some of that extra
Okay.
background and context about what things need to be properly packaged up and tidied up.
Sure. Sure. Okay. So when
Yeah.
you exited that, did you already have this new thing going when you exited that? Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been running Campaign Refinery for years. We had been, by the time I fully exited Contest Domination, it had become less and less and less of my schedule, like for years.
Okay.
But, Campaign Refinery had been charging customers for over 4 years by the time that basically it dissolved Contest
Okay.
Domination from, I couldn't even log in and edit the domain right now, right? So it's
They don't need
fully,
you there anymore.
yeah. I mean, they occasionally ask questions here and there, but it's yeah, it's not my responsibility
Yeah.
for the success or failure at this point. And so unburdening myself from that is a key piece of the evolution.
Totally. Totally. Yeah. So
And
any
then
other relationships that really stand out for you, Travis?
yeah, the last big one that comes to mind, at least in my current chapter, and again, hopefully many more chapters to write,
For
but
sure.
um, Andy Fletcher, who is the CTO and co-founder of a landing page software called Convertry. He lives over in the UK. And even though we've never met in person, we've been in a particular mastermind and kept in solid touch for quite a few years now, most of the lifespan of Campaign Refinery. And he's really helped level up my through guidance and even some code reviews and then most importantly helping me find lead developers when I've had to backfill the team or things have changed or whatever, to be a sounding board of and a sanity check on like, look, we're starting to get to a scale now that I've never achieved with any of my software platforms. When the AWS bill is a multiple of your mortgage in the Pacific Northwest, you start to like, hey, I got to start paying attention here
Uh-huh.
about
Uh-huh.
what's going on.
This is
And
noticeable.
yeah, and so his many years of experience, steady hand, and overall guidance on what the next level of developer should look like, and what attributes they should have, right? Because I'd learned some in the past, but trying to find, okay, now that we're getting to this next tier, what does the next caliber of person look like? How do we review that? How do I create a framework for a team going forward and manage a much larger team than I've ever had in the past?
Mhm.
And so that relationship has been super valuable. And there's of course affiliate intros that can go more than one direction. There's integration components between software. And there's frankly just a friendship because we have a lot in common. But I know that I would have been at key points when money was running out and key team members were leaving. I would have felt pretty isolated if I didn't have his more advanced guidance and review in the entire process to help me backfill, restructure, rethink, trim, all these things that were necessary, frankly, to not only stay alive as a software company, but to didn't put ourselves in a position to actually thrive.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah. So if you look at your relationships with any one of these three gentlemen that you've spoke about, Travis, and you think about one thing that's happened where it allowed you where you just got to make, I mean, and you kind of gave an example with Mark, the strategic partnership you guys did, and you did $250,000 in sales there was a really good example. But I want you to think of, another example where you got to make a really big impact in this world that hands down would have never happened if not for your relationship with, whether it's Mark, Michael, or Andrew.
I mean, that's tough. Recency bias, obviously Andy Fletcher's a huge piece, right? Because he's helping me fix my problems right now. Right. I I feel quite confident that if I did continue to push and if I did continue to try to build a software company, it would have been a challenge to get to a point that it became a true full-blown occupation instead of a side hustle if it
Mhm.
hadn't been for Mark, right? But then if it hadn't been for Mark, we wouldn't, even if the Mark thing had happened, if I hadn't then met Michael too, then, everything is leveling up, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, yeah,
So it's really hard to like pick one because I think if you in rear view mirror, everything is has a strand and everything's
yeah,
linked to one another, and without any one of them, you don't end up where you are
totally, totally. I
currently.
think about, Joe Polish was my introduction to direct response marketing and business back in 1996 when I had just started. I had spent the last 7 years working as a commercial fisherman up in Alaska to save up money to start my own business and didn't have a clue what I was doing. And I started a cleaning and restoration company because I knew a guy in Seattle who was in that business, and I thought, well, gosh, if he could do it, so can I. And so that was my reasoning for getting into that business. I'd like to say it was this grandiose thing, but it wasn't. And but I'll tell you, through that and meeting Joe, because I'll tell you that first year in business, it was rough. And and people thinking like, well, if I just had more money, then I'd be successful. No, not necessarily, man. I blew through a ton of money and still wasn't figuring out, what I needed to figure out because I didn't have the right people helping me. But when I met Joe, and with Joe's help over the course of the next 3 years, we completely transformed that company into one of the most successful by referral only cleaning companies, one van operations in the whole industry. And there's many other things that have happened in my life over the years because of Joe. And he's made a lot of connections for me over the years, and him and I have had this conversation that I'm because I made the comment to him one time, I shudder to think at what would have happened if you and I hadn't met. And he's like, well, Kevin, you were hungry, you were looking, you would have met somebody no matter what. And I'm gonna say, yeah, that might be true, but I'm damn glad you and I met. And so, and
Yeah, I
incredibly grateful for the relationships in my life, and I know you are too, Travis.
yeah,
And
I have immense gratitude for each one of those chapters and each one of the people that played a pivotal role in it. And frankly, I'm excited to see what the next chapters and the next people will be, right? And
totally,
I just hope, I don't need to be the star of anyone else's show by any stretch, but hopefully I can have a similar kind of impact for others if I haven't already. But just try to show people some neat things that I think might work, and the test results of us trying it, and
yeah,
try to
yeah,
provide as many resources as possible because I truly believe that software is going to eat the world
yeah,
in some way, shape, or form. Things like Chat GPT are just proving that more and more so.
for sure.
But I would like to see more people find ways to express themselves creatively through software, but there's so much to it, right? It's not just building the best widget. You have to build the best widget and have a great marketing system and
That's right.
a
That's right.
consistency, right, to things because I'll, I'm not the fastest mover, but I'm always moving in the same direction.
Mhm.
Right? If I move 1 inch a month, but I move 1 inch every month for 10 years, I'm gonna be further than someone who jumped out 1 foot in month one and never took it, went a different
That's right.
direction.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. That's right. Well, Travis, I really appreciate you having this conversation with me today. And you know, one of the goals for this podcast has always been that I want to, inspire the listeners through them hearing stories from people such as yourself to just inspire them to place an intentional focus on creating more real, meaningful, rewarding, and profitable relationships in their own life. And we have definitely, achieved that today. So I want to thank you for that. For anybody listening to this, it's going, man, Kevin, I really like Travis. And I'm curious to learn more about what he's doing. How can they find out more, Travis?
Yeah. So I mean, our platform is campaignrefinery.com.
Yep.
If you want to check out what that's all about. I did drop a link to you about a
Yep. You
pretty
did, and we
cool
will include that.
yeah, about a pretty cool thing that we're doing that's increasing clicks on your lead magnet by 7 to 8 times what you're currently getting, which has all kinds of magical benefits for the deliverability game. If you most people look at their lead magnet and they're getting, 40-50% open rates and like 2 to 5% click rates. And we're at like, 75% open rates and 73% click rates. So
It
it's
might be worth getting that to find out how they could do that.
yeah, it's totally free. It's just a really cool strategy we implemented that it's a quick win that just about everyone can do
Nice.
without dramatically overhauling their whole setup. So I think that that's a pretty cool thing for people to check out. And then obviously I'm active on social media, so at Travis Ketchum for Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn,
Okay.
whatever. And then if they want to
That's
shoot me an email, it's just travis@campaignrefinery.com.
nice. Okay. Perfect. Perfect. Travis, any last thing that you feel compelled to share before we call it a wrap today?
I do have one thing. So, I understand that the whole focus about the show is about relationships and you know, benefiting from them, providing them, et cetera. And the one thing I will say that I think has stuck out in my success of having relationships more so than other people I've seen, that get into a business for whatever reason is genuine curiosity,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're genuinely curious to the point of like, I feel compelled by some like greater force to figure out everything I can about this one thing,
Yeah.
the people that are the experts or the people that you need at that next step, that there's a genuine, like there's authenticity to that curiosity
Yeah.
that just sort of emanates through everything. And as long as that's sort of your North Star, relationships are so much easier.
Totally. Totally. It's funny. I have been this genuinely curious guy my entire life. In fact, it irks my wife sometimes because I ask so many questions. But I love talking with entrepreneurs. I love hearing about what they're working on, what their challenges are, what opportunities they're trying to take advantage. I mean, all this stuff. And because I am genuinely curious, and I have this gift of being able to, facilitate these valuable introductions and stuff. It served me really well over the years. And you're right that, there's no hiding that. When we are genuinely curious, people know it. They can totally sense that because we're just engaging with them that way.
And they're so much more compelled to actually help you
That's
and
right.
want to see you. They'll start rooting for you. Like because it's no longer feeling like an ask them. It becomes a rewarding experience, even if you don't actually give them anything, quote, tangible. Like seeing the genuine curiosity and rooting for that person and just nudging a few doors for them and watching them succeed is immensely rewarding for someone who's further down the pipeline. And so not that you should like use it as a tactic or anything, but like
No, no.
reevaluate about, how you're approaching it. Are you trying to get a relationship because it's they're going to get you 3 more affiliates for your launch, that's a really crappy reason
That's
to
right.
have a relationship. But if you're, if you're really curious about, hey, I'm trying to solve this, do you have any suggestions? Or, you know, "Hey, you've had a lot of success in this realm. I'm trying to navigate something kind of parallel. Do you have any feedback for me on what I might be doing wrong? Can you provide maybe questions I don't even know to ask?" Right?
Yes,
Like those kind of things are hugely powerful, and you'll be amazed at how much further they'll get you, not only in that initial conversation, but where it actually gets you in your path of discovery.
that's right. And when we are genuinely curious about what other people are sharing with us, we end up giving people this gift of feeling seen, heard, and understood. And it's a gift that we don't get to receive that often, unfortunately. But when people do receive that from us, they that that's what they'll remember, is how we made them feel when they're in our presence. And what you talked about, that you'll find them rooting for you, that is like so true, that they're going to root for you because they just like the way that they feel when they're around us.
Yep.
And yeah, and all it is it just comes down to just being present and being genuinely curious, and so yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that, Travis, because that's huge. That is huge. And want to thank you again for taking the time to do this interview. This has been awesome, and I'm really excited to get this interview out and share it with a whole bunch of other entrepreneurs. So thanks again, Travis.
Yeah, it's been a real pleasure. Thanks for having me on, and I'm sure we'll do something together in the future.
For sure.